Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're bringing together ancient dirt, cutting-edge linguistic science, and some deep philosophical reflection to unpack one of history's absolute greatest mysteries. We've all heard the story of the Tower of Babel, right? A united humanity tries to build this massive tower to the heavens, only to be stopped in their tracks, scattered across the earth, and their single language shattered into thousands. But what is the real truth behind this ancient account?
So let's just jump right in with the big question. Is the story of a tower that shattered human communication just an elaborate metaphor, a myth passed down through generations? Or did it actually happen? It's a question that's puzzled historians, linguists, and theologians for centuries. And to get to the bottom of it, we need to look at the clues left behind. Part 1. Discovery at Babylon.
To find our answers, we really have to travel back to ancient Mesopotamia, because there, buried in the sand, archaeologists have uncovered the ruins of these massive, imposing structures known as ziggurats. Think of a terraced, square-based tower. They were basically artificial mountains built with the sheer ambition of connecting the earth to the divine up in the heavens. And these structures act as the very real physical inspiration behind the biblical account of a tower reaching into the sky. But how did the writers of the biblical account come to know so much about Babylonian architecture? Well, it actually points back to a very specific and honestly tragic year, 586 BC. That's when the powerful king Nebuchadnezzar II attacked Jerusalem. He conquered the city and took its most educated, highly skilled citizens captive, dragging them all the way into exile in Babylon. And it was there that these captives witnessed these towering monuments being constructed right in front of them.
Dr. Irving Finkel over at the British Museum points out something absolutely crucial here. He notes that the early chapters of the Bible clearly draw from the Jews' own historical records and, frankly, their traumatic experiences. These enslaved captives were probably initially fascinated by the immense scale of the city, but they very quickly grew to view that ziggurat tower as a chilling symbol of sheer human arrogance and oppression.
And here is the physical smoking gun that backs this all up. It's a really fascinating comparison. The text from Genesis chapter 11 specifically states the builders used bricks for stone and bitumen for mortar. Fast forward to modern archaeology, and we have an original baked brick commissioned by King Nebuchadnezzar himself. When researchers examined it, they found a highly unusual building material for that region, a black ancient tar known as bitumen. It is a literal perfect match. It proves the core of the story is deeply rooted in verified historical fact. Part 2. History or myth? So, if the bricks are real, how did a physical building project become the origin story for our total inability to understand each other? It actually starts with the name itself. Theologians note that the word Babel is derived from the Hebrew word balal, which quite literally translates to confusion. The name represents humanity's ultimate recurring problem, this immense pride that seeks to build without divine guidance, which inevitably just leads to confusion, bitter division, and scattered peoples. When you map this out chronologically, it's really like looking at a timeline of human scattering and our desperate attempts to reunite. Roughly 4,200 years ago, during the era of Peleg, we see the sudden dispersion at Babel. Fast forward to 586 BC, and we witness the Babylonian exile, another profound moment of cultural displacement. Then skip all the way down to 1887 AD, when Dr. Zamenhof created the artificial language Esperanto to try and magically reverse this global division. Basically, we have been scattered for thousands of years. Part 3. Origin of languages. All right, let's shift gears a bit and look at the actual hard science behind the spoken tongue. 7,000. That is roughly how many distinct languages are spoken across the globe today. And cognitive scientists like Lera Boroditsky point out that these aren't just minor variations of one another. When you study them, you find an unpredictable, vast amount of fundamental differences that literally change how entirely different cultures perceive the world around them. And the crazy part? Experts are totally torn on how this staggering diversity came to be. They are caught between three competing theories for how distinct language families, like Cantonese and Catalan, even exist. The first is the biblical account of a sudden divine dispersion. The second is a slow, gradual evolution from a single ancient mother tongue. And the third suggests independent development, essentially originating from simple grunts in isolated pockets of the world. But despite all our modern technology and research, the scientific community is still pretty much at a loss here. Professor W.T. Fitch, who is an expert on the evolution of language, frankly admits we don't have a fully convincing answer.
Secular linguistics and science still heavily debate this evolution, which means the exact origin of our scattered languages remains a profound, unsolved mystery. Part 4. The language of love. Since science kind of leaves us hanging with unanswered questions, how do we actually bridge the gap? Well, we've certainly tried to fix the curse of Babylon on our own by inventing universal languages. Like we mentioned earlier, in 1887, the language Esperanto was created. The goal was noble, right? Uniting a war-torn world with a single, easy-to-learn vocabulary. But it completely failed to stop human hatred, prejudice, and war. It turns out, you can't just program peace into a dictionary. Theologians bring up a really fascinating comparison here. Think about the language of a computer. It's built on exact mathematics, programming, and cold logic. It's perfectly precise, sure, but it completely lacks a soul. The argument is that true human unity cannot be programmed like a computer. Instead, it requires the language of love. This is an innate language embedded in the human heart from birth. It requires absolutely no alphabet, relying entirely on empathy and human connection. Catholic philosophy suggests that the Holy Spirit actually provides this exact universal language. Think of the story of Pentecost, where sudden understanding replaced the ancient confusion of Babel. We speak this universal language today, not with complex grammar, but through simple, everyday acts: a sympathetic look, a friendly gesture, a helping hand, compassion, and forgiveness. These acts of charity are what truly dismantle the walls of pride. If you're wondering what this actually looks like in practice, look no further than the Longchow Parish. There, an entire village of nearly 500 people was converted and united. And how did they do it? Not through a single brilliant theological debate, not for a perfectly translated argument. It happened simply through observing a harmonious family life. A life lived with justice, humility, and peace was just far more persuasive than any spoken dialect. They lived the language of love, and the whole village understood it. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. We live in a world that is still obsessed with building towers of pride and walls of division. We constantly use our words to argue and separate. So, what language will you choose to speak today? Will you rely on the divisive pride of Babel, or will you choose the uniting, universal language of love in your own life? Something to think about. Thanks for exploring this topic with me, and keep learning.